Hello everyone, this is Helios Raven. I tell you how I do it, even if you don't care. And we're going to continue with our in-depth look into the forces of chaos in the Battlefleet Gothic rulebook. And since we've gone over everything else but the escorts, let's jump right into them. The first escort in our list is the Ideolator. The Idolator. Forgive me, I'm very horrible with pronouncing words. But in general, most of the Chaos forces seem to share the same pattern of stats, which is 1 hit point, 30 centimeters, 90-degree turns, 1 shield, armor 5, 2 turrets, which isn't bad for an escort, not too bad at all. Now, this particular ship's got 2 weapon batteries at 45 centimeter range that fires in its front, left, and right arc, and 1 lance with a 30 centimeter range in its front arc. Now, an interesting note with these is this ship does not suffer a column shift from firing over 30 centimeters. So, you can use this as a nice long-range ship and a close-range ship without any penalties. Without as many penalties as you would, which you would for firing weapon batteries for over 30 centimeters. So, this thing's got some pretty nice, heavy, decent firepower. This is great for covering your close-range ships that are running up the middle that you want to protect from long-range fire or ordnance weapons. So you'd probably want to consider, if you're doing more of a close combat-y feel with your cruisers, might want to consider having a bunch of these guys in your ranks to defend these guys to defend your cruisers when they run up to get close to pelt away at the enemy forces with weapon batteries. The next one is the Infidel class Raider. This ship has only 1 turret, and so it kind of loses its ability to defend itself against ordnance that way, but still it's got 30 centimeter weapon batteries of 2 that can fire on its left, right, or front arc, and 30 centimeter range torpedoes that have a firepower of 2 in its front arc. So, in general, this thing is really nice for ordnance control. If you want to have a lot of missiles on the field and such, you might want missiles on their field and then have these guys. You might want to consider having these guys. They also make great bodyguards as well for cruisers, because you just have them sitting there, firing their torpedoes away, and then when all of them get close, they just give their weapon batteries in on the fray to really help out. And you get a couple of these combined together, they can have a pretty decent firefight on their own with their weapon batteries. So this one I'd probably consider more of a defender type of ship. Something you would keep on the side to throw out torpedoes when needed, and to just really, if you want some extra weapon battery firepower with your ships, then this one's definitely a nice one to go with. Chances are, though, I'd probably just forego the Infidel and go with Ideolator instead of this ship, but that's my own personal opinion. Again, it does have its ups, where if you decide to make a huge fleet of ships, like I do with with some of my armies, then this one's great for doing lone groups of fighters that just fly around the entire field firing torpedoes out. That's really, if you want that kind of strategy, then definitely this cruiser is one of the best ones in the Chaos Forces we've seen so far to do this kind of trick with. So you might want to consider this ship if that's the kind of strategy you want to go more, is just having large fleets of smaller ships flying around being really annoying, which these guys are really good at doing. And then we've got the Iconoclasts. Again, I'm probably saying that wrong. Iconolists class destroyers. These guys, again, these guys are a little bit weaker. They only have an armor 4 with 1 turret, so I definitely would use these as like bodyguard ships, keeping them really close, because they do have weapon batteries, 30 centimeter range with 3 firepower, which can be fired at its front, left, and right arc. So I'd probably keep these guys close to a cruiser to just give some added extra weapon battery firepower to them when they really need it, because, like I said, weapon batteries can be very powerful, especially in close range, and having a lot of these little guys hanging around a big guy with a lot of weapon batteries just adds more punishment It's just more salt in the wound. It's basically a salt in the wound type of move. You know, you have your cruiser come in, blast away with its weapon batteries and its lances, then have these little guys follow up right behind and combine fire their weapon batteries to do even more damage, because they do it. They can do it very well. Like I said, I would just keep them close to a bigger ship, because these guys really can't handle themselves on their own, especially since they have very weak armor. They're very fragile like Eldar, so you run a risk with these guys, especially since they only have one shield. And if you're fighting something like Tau or Imperial Guard that have a lot of weapons at their disposal, these guys won't last long by themselves. And then they also have a transport, but again, the transport is basically the same as the Imperial Navy one. And again, there's no point in mentioning it because it's really only mostly used for mission objectives. You're not going to use this. You can't even buy it as a point thing, so there's really no point in getting into discussions with that one. And looking at that, that is it for the Escort class ships, and we are done with the rulebook of the Battlefleet Gothic for Chaos. And so, let's see, ships with torpedo tubes are armed with normal and boarding. Just one other note, sorry here, I didn't notice this before. Any of these ships with torpedo tubes are armed with normal torpedoes, and they can be armed with boarding torpedoes. Boarding torpedoes are basically torpedoes that, once they hit, perform a boarding action. So it's basically you take a little guy, put him in a tube, launch him forward, and hope he hits a ship, gets out, and does some massive destruction. So, which is also nice. And the only thing though is you have to distinguish which type of torpedo you're firing before you actually fire it. And I believe I've covered everything everything else that needs to be done. So that is it for the Chaos Incursion fleet for the Battlefleet Gothic rulebook. And we'll continue on with their rulebook called the Traitor Legion. And until then, this is Helios Raven, signing off.